The next best way to live longer is actually calorie restriction. If you reduce your calorie consumption by 30%, you can extend your life by 30%. This is done in multiple animal models. I call that the starve yourself 1/3 to death diet. Nobody really likes to sign. If you have a clipboard, nobody's signing up for it. They need better marketing. But that's a 30% extension of life. In this particular study, we're talking about a 90% extension of life.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Thrive State Podcast. I am your host, Dr. V, triple board certified MD and performance and longevity expert. And on this episode, I introduce a molecule that is really surging in the biohacking space, one that you might want to get familiar with and see if you want to include it into your stack of performance and longevity resources. Now, before we get into the podcast and this episode, I want to thank all the listeners who has really allowed this podcast to grow to the level it has today. And in order for this movement to grow, if you haven't already, please do us a favor by subscribing to this podcast, giving us a 5-star review wherever podcasts are heard, and sharing this episode with your friends and family members. That, to me, is going to allow this message and this really movement of hope, this movement of what is possible for humanity, grow out in the world today. And as a gift for listening, I want to share my tools and my gifts on all the biohacks that I use for performance and longevity by going to thrivestatestarter.com. Also, if you haven't already, pick up my book, Thrive State, at thrivestatebook.com. It's a book that gives you the framework for human performance and longevity and the pillars in life you need to focus on to master your energy, your bioenergetic state, or your biofield. What is that? Well, I mean, your state of being, what you feel, the energy you bring into every moment speaks to every single cell in your body. It communicates with your mitochondria and your DNA that either puts you in a stress and inflammatory mode or gives yourselves the power and the direction to perform at their best so that you can live a long time and so that you can give your very best in terms of your energy, your performance, your productivity into your purpose and into the world. Not only does that energy permeate every single cell in your body, but it also permeates outwards. Your energy will affect how you interact with people, whether your people is an audience, whether your people are people that you are serving your services and products with, the people in your relationships, the people that you work with in your organization. So your energy affects the reality of what is produced in the communities that we serve and that we belong to. And so mastering our energy is just that important. So check out my book, Thrive State, at thrivestatebook.com. Now, on today's podcast, I introduce to you someone that has actually created a human version of a molecule that was deemed Nobel Prize worthy and actually won the Nobel Prize back in the 1980s. Now, what if aging wasn't something we have to passively accept, but something we could actually delay or potentially reverse? Now, this molecule actually has studies in rats that increase their life expectancy by 90%. And we are finding that it has great anecdotal studies in humans right now. And this might be something you might want to check out. My guest today is Chris Burres. He's a research scientist and co-founder of MyVitalC, one of the first supplement companies to commercialize carbon-60 for human consumption. Chris is best known for popularizing ESS60, a highly purified olive oil-based form of carbon-60, which was, again, originally studied in a Nobel Prize-winning discovery. The molecule has showed jaw-dropping results in longevity in animal studies, and he is on a mission to explore how this super antioxidant might actually support mitochondrial function, reduce inflammation, and extend our health span. Today, we'll explore the science, the controversy, and the potential of C60 and how it fits into the evolving landscape of bioenergetic medicine and longevity optimization. So, ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy this conversation with myself and Chris Burres. Chris Burres, welcome to the Thrive State Podcast.
Dr. V, thank you so much for having me.
Before we get into your work, there's a portion of the show called the 5 to Thrive. 5 questions I dig in that appears mysteriously out of nowhere. 1,000 points each. Each answer is meant to be 30 seconds or less. And this is just to drive and lubricate the conversation for later. So my question to you, here we go. Chris Burres, are you ready to play the 5 to Thrive?
5 to Thrive. I am. Hit me.
Okay. Question number 1 is, what makes you feel most alive today?
Ooh. I'll tell you, I've had this opinion about exercise. I heard this quote, I don't remember who it was from, that said, exercise is not the penance you pay for whatever you did over the weekend or whatever you did last night. Exercise is the celebration of what your body can do. So that is one of the things I really love to do is to actually get out and do a tough workout.
Amazing. I love the word celebration. Question number 2 is, what one book, idea, or phrase entered your life that completely turned your life around?
One book, idea, or phrase that entered. I keep going back, and I actually bought this for my kids. I have 2 boy-girl twins. They usually come in 2s. That's how that works. And the book was by Susan Jeffries. I think it's Susan Jeffries, called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And it was my first self-help book. I was probably about the same age as, maybe a little older than my kids. They're 15 now. And it really kind of landed in so many different areas, not just that title, but some concepts in the book. And one of them that I think was really important is you need to have diversity in your life, because that builds resilience. Because anything, this is human, and there are horrible things that happen, and any one aspect of your life could be taken away at any point. And by having diversity of joys and things that you do, you actually end up having resilience against what bad things might happen. Now, have a positive mindset, and usually bad things don't happen. So also focus on that positive mindset.
Amazing. Question number 3 is, if I were to put you in front of 100,000 people, handed you a mic, and have you sing a song to that crowd, number 1, would you feel fear? And number 2, what song would you be singing?
Absolutely. I would feel fear. I'm good with public speaking. I haven't spoken in front of 100,000 people, so that even there would be fear associated with that, or exhilaration. And the first song that comes to mind is, my favorite movie is The Sound of Music. And so I've got The Hills Are Alive, which is, I don't have an octave, like I don't even, there's no definition. There's the distance between whatever octaves I can do or may be able to do, and that song are out of the, but that's the first thing that came to my mind. The Hills Are Alive with The Sound of Music.
I'm getting the chance to really truly feel your energy and how you approach life by hearing the word celebration in your first answer, and with the song, The Hills Are Alive with The Sound of Music. Just your zest for appreciating this beautiful gift that is breath that we all get to have. Question number 4 is, what is one biohack that you use religiously that might not be, on the forefront of many people's minds?
So I'm going to give 2. Obviously, one biohack is my own product. A lot of people are not aware of it. And so, that would be a reason that it's not on the front mindset of people. A biohack that I use, I'm going to go with a biohack that I try to use, right? And I was even talking to my son this weekend about how I love the phrase, you should be meditating for 10 minutes a day. And if you're too busy to meditate for 10 minutes a day, you should be meditating for 20 minutes per day. I love that phrase. And it's not that I've been busy. I just have fallen off kind of that meditation practice. And so that's something that maybe a lot of people do use, a lot of people don't use. Certainly at this moment, I'm not using it, and I need to get back to it. And maybe that's just a reminder, hey, some of these things that you're supposed to do, you're going to fall off. Like, have some grace. It's okay. Get back to them and get a focus and let them, develop in you again, we'll go back to resilience.
Yeah, amazing. Last question for you is, what makes you feel most alive now, other than exercise?
I gotta hit you there. I'll tell you, it took us a while as a company, and which may be why some of your audience hasn't heard of our product, to start going to events. And since going to events, I couldn't encourage anybody who doesn't get to events more to go to events. And there are different events that are around the country. Maybe financially, there are some events that are pretty expensive. Dave Asprey's event is pretty expensive, and don't let that dissuade you from getting to some events, because a lot of people, I believe, are on a health journey. And when you do that with a tribe, then that helps that health journey significantly. And so going to these events, I just get so energized, connecting with so many people, like reconnecting with you. Like, that's how we actually put today together. That is something that really exhilarates me.
Amazing. 5,000 points, you win the 5 to Thrive, which means at the next event, healthy meal is on me, my brother.
I love it.
So let's dive straight into it. The C60 molecule. People may or may not have heard of it. I think biohackers probably, yes, but the lay public may not know of it at all. But it was a molecule that actually won someone the Nobel Prize. And so let's talk a little bit about the history of that. How did that come, to mind? And then a little bit, then how did this molecule started to kind of step into the biohacking world most recently?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think just when I'm at these events, right? So this is one of the things I'm really excited about, going to these events. And these are in the biohacking space. We estimate that about 30% of people have heard of either C60 or what we really kind of focus on is ESS60. And we can talk about that in a little bit. So in the layperson market, it's basically nobody. Like, nobody who's not a biohacker, almost nobody has heard of this. And it's really exhilarating when I'm outside of the scope of biohacking and I can talk to somebody about the molecule, because it just happens so rarely. What is the molecule? So we'll just talk about that. So I'm actually holding up a model of the molecule. If you're listening, imagine a soccer ball where the lines on the soccer ball represent the bonds between the carbon atoms. So we have a spherical molecule of 60 carbon atoms. As Dr. V mentioned, the guys who discovered this molecule actually won the Nobel Prize. They discovered it in 1985 at Rice University here in Houston, Texas. That's where our lab is based. And then won the Nobel Prize in 1996. So a short 11 years from discovery to being awarded the Nobel Prize. Just real short backstory. There's a fancy piece of equipment at Rice University that can shine, I'll describe it, shine a laser at a sample that vaporizes that sample. A puff of inert gas takes that vapor and into a mass spectrometer, and they can look at the individual molecules that are created. There was a guy, his name is Harold Kroto. He actually became Sir Harold Kroto because he won the Nobel Prize and they knighted him. So that's kind of cool. He saw some spectrum in space, thought they didn't know exactly what they were, thought they might be carbon related, flew here to Houston and asked Dr. Richard Smalley, who had control of this piece of equipment, to put carbon in it. It was kind of interesting. Dr. Smalley's like, I'm not putting boring carbon in this piece of equipment. I'm doing sexy things like titanium and exotic steel alloys. He actually got rebuked all of the 3 times that he came back. And on the 3rd time, one of Dr. Smalley's grad students said, hey, I'm going to come in over the weekend. I'll put your boring old carbon into this machine. And that's when they noticed a peak at 60 and noticed a peak at 70. And that was really the data that was necessary to discover this molecule, because there was no real reason there should be a peak at 60 and 70. Interestingly, 1 year prior, IBM actually had the same results in their research and dismissed it as an anomaly. So, it's really fascinating how you interpret information, and being creative with interpreting information is extremely important for, future successes and kind of future discoveries. The molecule is absolutely amazing. It didn't win the Nobel Prize for nothing. It won the Nobel Prize. Really, I would kind of hone in on 2 things. One is this soccer ball shaped molecule, and I'll be calling it ESS60, is big enough for any atom on the periodic chart to fit inside of it. So there's a new symbol in chemistry because of this feature. So we're familiar with our at symbol. So if you say lanthanum at this molecule, that means lanthanum physically trapped inside of it. So not covalently bonded with the exterior or ionically bonded with the exterior, but physically trapped inside of it. So I think if you make a discovery that adds a new symbol to the language of chemistry, you're probably going to win a Nobel Prize, right? So that was one of them. The other is this molecule is, in fact, amazing. I describe it as performing as well or better than the current best materials in almost every application. So it makes better inks, better batteries, better tires, better photocells. And this is often the part of the presentation, like when I'm at conferences where people are like, wait, isn't this a health conference? Like, aren't we talking about healthy stuff? You said inks, batteries, tires, and photocells. And I kind of like to joke, nobody in your audience woke up, well, we're biohackers, so maybe one, woke up this morning, looked at their car and thought, I wonder what components of my car battery I could be taking on a daily basis in order to improve my health. And the story gets a little worse first. So they thought this molecule would be toxic because there's about 20 hexagonal shapes, which is the same as the benzene ring. So 20 of them on the exterior of this cage. Benzene is ubiquitous in our society. It's a necessary aspect of modern society. And if, just to give you some perspective, if you just glance around wherever you're at and look at anything that's plastic and then poof, it's gone, because its foundational molecule is the benzene ring. Same with a lot of medications, including aspirin and a lot of detergents. So we don't have modern society without the benzene ring, and it's everywhere. But when it's on its own, it's known to be toxic and known to be carcinogenic. So if you have 20 of those on the exterior of this cage, they just assumed it would be toxic. They put it in a toxicity study. Instead of being toxic, the test subjects that they gave it to, in this case it was Wistar rats, lived 90% longer than the control group. So that's the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals in history. It's peer-reviewed published research, and I'm very proud to share that our lab provided the material, and our lab is mentioned in that original study. And I'll kind of wrap up all of this. Our most consistent testimonial is people take the product in the morning, they report mental focus and energy during the day, and then better sleep that night.
Amazing. What is the mechanism of action of this, and why are we getting such wide range effects as it pertains to focus, sleep, and some potential longevity benefits?
Yeah, well, your background, you're like, okay, great. This all sounds really good. What's happening? And I'm going to jump into it, and then maybe we can come back to the story, because it took a really long time for my business partner and I to actually decide that we wanted to be in the supplement space. You know, you're in this space, in this arena, right? I think it's generous to say that the supplement space is challenged. Right? You may hear of a new supplement and you're like, oh, let's just say, for instance, NMN. That sounds amazing. I want to try it. Now I've got to do 2 hours of research to try and find a source that I might trust. And hopefully my research leads me in the right path. Like, it's just a challenged industry. And we can talk about that. As we decided to come into the supplement space, my role as the chief scientist, of course, changed from chief scientist at a carbon nanomaterial manufacturing facility to now chief scientist at a supplement company. And my job was to figure out the first thing was two things. One, is a 90% extension of life even a big deal, right? Like, your intuition says it is. You certainly never walked into a GNC and said, this one doubles your life, this one triples your life. You know, there's no kind of frame of reference for there. The next best way to live longer is actually calorie restriction. If you reduce your calorie consumption by 30%, you can extend your life by 30%. This is done in multiple animal models. I call that the starve yourself 1/3 to death diet. Nobody really likes to sign. If you have a clipboard, nobody's signing up for it. They need better marketing. But that's a 30% extension of life. In this particular study, we're talking about a 90% extension of life. So yeah, it's a big deal. Next, what might the mechanism of action? I already mentioned sleep is one of the things. We all know that sleep is good for your mental, physical, and emotional well-being. And so we just let's hang our hat there. But also, let's dig in deeper. And then I started thinking about the rats live 90% longer. What does the medical community think about aging? And in general, right, so not everyone, but in general, they think about it as an oxidation and an inflammation process. There's even a word called inflammaging because it's so tied with inflammation is so tied with aging. You know, we're in Houston, Texas, so I like to put big old check marks. And as it relates to antioxidant, there's an ad hoc study out on the web showing us to be 172 times more powerful than vitamin C. And then there's peer-reviewed published research showing us to be 125 times more powerful than vitamin C. So that's a big old check mark on antioxidant. The next is inflammation, and we have to be really careful. I'm sure you're aware when we talk about inflammation. The reason is because the FDA has equated conversations about inflammation, acute chronic inflammation, with the diseases of inflammation, which are also the diseases of aging, which is arthritis, Alzheimer's disease, cardiovascular disease, cancer. And so if I come onto your show and I say, we address this inflammation, what the FDA hears is we cure cancer, cardiovascular disease, arthritis. No, that is, there's so much extremely expensive work that needs to be done to kind of even start to make those kinds of claims. What the FDA will allow us to say is that we address inflammation as it relates to exercise-induced inflammation. So we've all had a tough workout or maybe just walked longer one day than we normally do and felt that inflammation in our body. We absolutely can say that we address that type of inflammation. And I want to sit on inflammation for just a little bit because there's some, I think, very interesting and for pretty recent paths that we're on. So at the A4M, so American Academy of Anti-Aging, you were on the red carpet at that event, well, the closing event. We had a booth, and we had a Dr. Lane Young came up to us in the middle of the show, came up to our booth, and I had had a conversation with him back at Dave Asprey's biohacking conference previously. He came up and he said this thing to me, and I was like, Dr. Young, I have to record this. And so he said it again, and so I can remember it pretty well. He says, Chris, I don't care if you're male, female, pre-surgery, post-surgery, cardiovascular disease, otherwise healthy, your product will take elevated HSCRP, and we'll talk about that in a second, from even high ranges that he wasn't able to move the needle on into normal ranges in 4 to 8 weeks. He also went on to say that it improves HRV, right? So heart rate variability and sleep up between 20 and 60%. Now, HSCRP stands for high sensitivity C-reactive protein, and it is an indication of your inflammatory status. And I learned this later because Dr. Young was talking about a client at 9, got him down to 0.9 after 4 to 8 weeks on our product. I spoke with an oncologist later, and the oncologist was like, if you have an HSCRP of 9, we assume you have cancer until we prove otherwise. So that's a pretty inflamed state that this individual is at. And so we're in the middle of doing what I call an ad hoc HSCRP study, because I want to kind of prove up that concept. We're actively looking for people who have kind of elevated HSCRP. Their protocols aren't working. We'll get them product. And so if anybody in this audience is interested in that, they can reach out to us. I think it's pretty fantastic. And I'm going to fold one last piece. So these are, you're taking some biological aging tests, right? Playing around with this, trying to figure out, here's some of my results. And you may not be aware of this. At the recent Health Optimization Summit, the booth next to us, actually it's Core Health. They actually have a ESR test. And it's erythrocyte sedimentation rate test. And what that is, basically, you put a drop of blood inside of a capillary tube, you hold it vertically so it's exposed to gravity, and the rate at which the blood cells separate from the plasma is an indication of your inflammatory status. So I took this test, and he has a biological component to that, and that biological component had me at 25 plus years younger than my chronological age. I'll also share glycan age, right? They are looking at glycans on cells in your blood. This typically goes one direction as you age. You don't reverse it, right? It's a decline because I think that's associated because you're aging. And so I took this, and it's also a good indication of inflammation. And it actually wouldn't surprise me. I haven't dug into this. If the ESR rate, it's that glycans and the stickiness of the glycans are actually probably some of the reason why they separate at a different rate. Anyway, glycan age had my biological age when I took that test. I think at 34, it had me, at 35. Excuse me, at 55, it had me 34 years younger, and I'm doing the math wrong. Our product doesn't help you with math. Just going to share that. It had me at a biological age of 21, whatever that works out to be in terms of when I took that test. And I like to joke, like, if you're biologically younger than 21, can you still drink? Like, do you even want to be younger than that biologically? But I share that because, yeah, I'm fairly dialed in with diet and exercise and sleep and everything else. But these are fantastic numbers that I think are related to consuming the product. And I've been talking for a while. So we do have our latest theory is related to the ESS60 molecule in mitochondria, but I wanted to turn it over to you before I keep talking.
No, that's where I was going to go next. I mean, it went from a molecule that won the Nobel Prize, and we've got all these studies in rats. Tell us about kind of the story behind taking the C60 and then developing ESS60. And so what is that like? And what do we know in terms of its safety profile in humans?
Yeah, so the way we think about it is C60 is for industrial applications, and there's peer-reviewed published research that proves if it's processed improperly, it's harmful. ESS60 is C60 that's been processed for people and pets. And one of the big drivers of that is let me kind of squeeze in here. What a very interesting journey that we've been on, right? So this initial study comes out in mid-2012. By mid-2013, we start getting the phone calls from this crazy, wacky group of people called biohackers. I can say that affectionately now because I am a biohacker. And they were asking us how much of this product should they take. And my business partner and I were conservative carbon nanomaterial scientists. And what we heard them asking is, hey, Chris, that stuff you sell to research institutions around the world to put into ink, batteries, tires, and photocells, how much of that stuff should we be consuming? And we both had the same answer. We think the answer is zero, right? Let me be clear. In the literature, it was clear that the molecule was safe, but we're conservative carbon nanomaterial scientists. So we actually added not for human consumption to our labeling in mid-2013. So from 1991 all the way to mid-2013, we don't have not for human consumption on our labeling because the biohackers haven't found it yet. And then we add it in mid-2013. And that actually led to some really interesting calls because we were getting about 2 to 3 phone calls per week. And they looked like, hey, Chris, I just want to share with you, my knee pain is gone. And it was like, wait a minute, you mean the knee pain of your rat? Because it literally says not for human consumption on the labeling. And they're like, yeah. Hey, if my rat weighs 275 pounds and does HIIT training on Tuesdays and Thursdays, should they take more on Tuesdays and Thursdays? So we know this is going on. My business partner and I are getting together quarterly to kind of figure out, do we want to get into this challenged industry? That happened from mid-2013 all the way to the latter part of 2017. And in fact, in that time frame, I found a research paper that said 50% of the supplements that are on the market, so they purchased some supplements off the market, 50% of them did not have in them what they said they had in them, right? And so this, again, just reinforced what my business partner and Robert and I were getting together quarterly, actually in the conference room right behind me, talking about, hey, do we want to get into this industry? No, it's a challenge industry. It's not, it's not the exacting standards that we're used to. Finally, at the end of 2017, a guy with a big YouTube following started, how it always changes, right? These days, started talking about all the benefits he was getting, taking it on a daily basis. And our phone went from ringing 2 to 3 times per week to 10 times per day. And now at that quarterly meeting, we're like, okay, this is a bigger opportunity than we realized. We looked back to that paper where 50% of the supplements on the market didn't have in them what they said they had in them. We're like, this is going to happen in this space. So we're in a unique position. We have a lab, we have the lab equipment. We've been delivering an exacting standard for all of these years. We probably owe it to the consumers to get into the space. And that's really when we kind of fired up ESS60. We tested 22 of the products in the C60 space. And all of them, except for one, and of course ours, were woefully low in concentration. And so we're just like, hey, if we're going to go into a biohacking space where only 30% of people have even heard of the kind of industrial molecule, how do we keep them safe? And I'm not going to belie, it's good for business, right? We're talking about a molecule that we have the trademark on, but it wasn't born out of that. It was actually born out of how do we keep the consumer safe? And so in 2018, we started bringing this to market. And that's kind of the distinction between C60 and ESS60. Now, in terms of health profile, people ask, okay, what's the toxicity level? I kind of joke, there's a little bit of facetiousness going on here, that it's the same toxicity of olive oil, and that involves drowning. Because the reality is if you start to consume too much oil, eventually your body will just reject it. Now, is that poisoning? Like, it's not actually getting into your system and doing any harm. It's getting into your stomach, and your stomach's like, I've had enough. We don't need all of this. And you throw it up. And in reality, water can be more dangerous, right? If you drink too much water too quickly, you can get hyperhidrosis. Your cells, this sounds horrific, start exploding because so much water is in them. It is a deadly thing, but yeah, we don't think that there's a toxicity level for the product.
I hope you're enjoying the podcast so far. If you are, I just wanted to let you know, join our community. There's so many free resources and a great community of people that desire health, happiness, human potential, to have more in their life, more health, more energy. And when you have those two things together, you could create more happiness, more abundance, whether it be financial, romantic, all these things in your life. And if you're just starting out, you don't know where to go, just sign up for thrivestatestarter.com, because in there you're going to get a bundle of information that includes a longevity ebook, a longevity and performance resource guide, lecture notes that come from my keynotes at Google, at Fortune 500 companies, all the insights in that keynote in lecture slide form given to you. And then finally, breathwork. I share 3 powerful breathwork exercises to access calm, which really gives you clarity and peace during the day, to access energy if you need to wake up and really motivate yourself, and finally a breathwork routine that you could do every single morning so that you could be very intentional with how you create that day. You can find all this stuff delivered free to your inbox at thrivestatestarter.com. And our community is growing. If you want to be a part of a community of people that desire the Thrive State, that are really in Thrive State themselves, and help other people along with that, you could be a part of the community. You can get group coaching from me. We do breathwork sessions, meditation sessions, and you also get to drop in and participate in podcasts in the future. You could find more about the community at mythrivestate.com. That's mythrivestate.com. So check out those resources. You're not going to be disappointed. And please enjoy the remainder of this podcast. That is really good to hear. What do you find?
Did you accidentally consume like a gallon the other day? That is really good to hear.
But thank you. We do see, and thank you for sending product over, our way. But yeah, we do see different type of dosaging, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe 3 vials you have for heavy workouts versus, 1 vial for mental and cognitive performance. It sounds like, there's no upper limit, but based on what anecdotally at this point, and we recognize that there are probably some limitations in terms of what we're able to prove at the human level, but what have you heard anecdotally in terms of what you've seen, and have you been surprised by anything you've seen?
So just to clarity, you mentioned a vial, and we do sell it in this kind of vial/ampule, and that is 5 mils or 1 teaspoon. And so that is our typical recommended serving of our olive oil product. I think a kind of really cool thing to share is we've got a 2-time U.S. ultra running champion who absolutely loves our product. He's also an amazing biohacker. Not really a surprise if you're a 2-time U.S. ultra running champion. You're doing a lot of stuff right. And my first conversation, I will always remember my first conversation with him, because he shared, Chris, I was taking 1 serving of your product. I didn't really notice anything. And I kind of joke, like all good biohackers, he tripled the servings. By the way, there are things you should not triple. If you're a biohacker, there are some, like if rapamycin, do not triple that. Like if you got your hands on it, don't triple it. So he, in his words, he said, I was like, wow, this could be the difference between somebody having running as a hobby or having running as a career. That's how much of a difference he said it made. And the way he described it is that he didn't believe it sped exercise recovery. he believed it prevented damage in the first place.
Mm.
And the way he described this was on the last 5 miles of a 50-mile run. By the way, a phrase you will never hear again, probably. Where strength and stability were previously a problem, they're no longer a problem. And that actually does tie into kind of the boss theory that we'll get to here shortly. He, like I described, is a really kind of intuitive and analytical biohacker who at one point he was like, hey, I think this might be a crutch that my body is using. Kind of similar, I like to describe it like if you start taking testosterone, your body will produce less testosterone. Like that's an absolute crutch. So he cycles on it, off of it, and he did this in the early days and really convinced himself that it was not a crutch. It was just augmenting his physiology. And we do believe that that's happening at the mitochondrial level. So, triple, I know people take, when I'm at these conferences, I'm kind of doing shots. I'll do between 5 and 10 shots at a conference, and I'm able to sustain. These are long. You've been at a conferences, right? Like these are 17-hour plus days, and you're having to use your brain, having kind of intelligent conversations with a lot of intelligent people. And so, yeah, that kind of helps me sustain through those events.
Amazing. You mentioned something just now, the boss theory. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So as we're one, right. So we got, antioxidant, great, big old check mark. Anti-inflammatory because of the risks, restrictions of the FDA. We'll put a little check mark there, right? Like we don't need to be braggadocious. And I started kind of trying to understand, okay, we have head to toe testimonials. What is it that is causing head-to-toe testimonials? And we finally have landed on this BOSS theory. So BOSS stands for Buffering Oxidative Stress System. And here's what it looks like. So we know from peer-reviewed published research that this ESS60 molecule gets into the mitochondria. We also know from way back in the 90s when it was discovered that it can hold up to 6 negatively charged particles on the exterior of this cage. And what that looks like, so super brief refresher, mitochondria, the powerhouse of every cell. There's between 50 and 5,000 mitochondria in every cell in your body, except for your blood cells, which have 0, and your brain and neurons, which have 2 million. I think it's amazing how much energy our nervous system uses relative to other systems. Like every power source, there is a negative byproduct. You think about your car going down the road, you've got exhaust. You think about your power plant, you've got a smokestack and smoke. In the case of the mitochondria, it's reactive oxygen species. I like to describe these as if they're left to their own devices, they run around like little bumper cars, rusting everything they bump into. They're causing that oxidative stress, oxidative damage, and frankly, ultimately, inflammaging is what's the result. Internal to the mitochondria, there are 2 antioxidants that manage those reactive oxygen species, and that's glutathione and melatonin. And I like to pause here. Melatonin, the sleep hormone, right? Our most consistent testimonial is related to sleep. There's some nice parallels here. So those manage those reactive oxygen species so they don't run around like little bumper cars. But what happens when you stress a mitochondria? Well, first off, how do you stress a mitochondria? I kind of joke, if you live in this modern society, you have stressed mitochondria, right? You've got, pollution and, tough workouts, flying on an airplane, you've got EMF radiation, too much sunlight, smoking, drinking, a stressful email, like modern society causes stressed mitochondria. At that point, you have more reactive oxygen species than the internal glutathione and melatonin can manage, and that's where we think the ESS60 molecule steps in and holds on to those negatively charged particles, up to 6 of those negatively charged particles, until that mitochondria can replenish the glutathione or replenish the melatonin, and then they can manage them properly. So I have a fun analogy, and I'm sure you'll agree, like all biological analogies should start with Mardi Gras. I mean, a lot of biology happens at Mardi Gras. So it's the end of Mardi Gras, and you have these drunk reactive oxygen species on Bourbon Street running around causing this oxidative stress, oxidative damage, and ultimately inflammaging. And you have the New Orleans Police Department, the glutathione and melatonin, coming onto Bourbon Street, handcuffing themselves to those reactive oxygen species and getting them off of Bourbon Street. But what does the New Orleans Police Department do when they get overwhelmed? They take these reactive oxygen species and they stick them in a paddy wagon. they attach them to the exterior of this ESS60 molecule so they can't do any damage. And then when the New Orleans Police Department is able to replenish the glutathione and or melatonin, then they can handcuff themselves to those reactive oxygen species and get them off of Bourbon Street. And that's why we say that this ESS60 molecule is the boss of buffering oxidative stress system.
So if we take a look at that molecule, we can see basically all the carbons are equally, equidistant from each other. There's no charges out there. This is a hydrophobic molecule, which means there's no charge out there. It's kind of repellent of water, which is why yours is in olive oil. Lay people may not know this, but the biohackers probably have heard of different forms of C60 being an aqueous form. And so what can you speak to things like that? And should we be wary of aqueous C60?
Well, to that last question, the short answer is absolutely, in my opinion. So let's start from this foundation. So the ESS60 molecule, C60 molecule, is a naturally occurring molecule. Everyone in your audience has been exposed to this. Here's the evidence. If you take the soot of a candle, right, and the way you collect the soot from a candle is you put a cold steel plate over a candle flame, that deep dark soot is parts per million or parts per billion of the ESS60 molecule. So we've all been exposed to it. So that's a naturally occurring molecule, and you're right, it is hydrophobic, so it is not water soluble. And just as an example, you could take a pile of this crystalline powder, which would be a black powder. The crystals would be kind of like sugar crystals or salt crystals. You can consume that, assuming it's ESS60, right, for people and pets. And because it's not water soluble, you would just end up excreting it out. By dissolving it into the olive oil, you actually break those crystals apart, and now you have individual ESS60 molecules floating around in that oil. And it's from just a pure surface area, it's basically infinitely more bioavailable from that perspective. Now, when you start talking about water-soluble molecules, that's where you add an OH or collection of OH molecules to the exterior of this cage. Now it can be water-soluble. But that is a new molecule. That is not a naturally occurring molecule. I actually had an interesting interaction with a CEO of somebody who sells an aqueous version. And I was like, hey, this molecule, C60, is a naturally occurring molecule, but you're saying that water-soluble C60 is also a naturally occurring molecule. Where does it occur in nature? And his response was, well, if you take C60, which is naturally occurring, and you take OH, which is also naturally occurring, and you shove these together, you have a naturally occurring molecule. And I was like, no, you have a different molecule. In fact, that's a very different molecule that needs its own toxicity study. And at that point, he was like, hey, we're arguing semantics. And I was like, no, we're actually arguing chemistry. This is a different man-made molecule. As such, without the even most basic toxicity studies, I would not consume it. And I'll tell you, my intuition is that this will probably prove out to be non-toxic and healthy, but that's not where you should. You think back when this first study came out and our decision to put on not for human consumption, that's where I operate. Like, what is the right attitude? This is a molecule that's not naturally occurring, that does not have any toxicity studies on it. I personally would not consume it.
Got it. My friend, this is pretty amazing stuff. I would probably say if there's anyone who's kind of considering it right now, I mean, you mentioned a few things in terms of pain, in terms of recovery, in terms of sleep. If somebody had a plethora of things to choose from, is there any, condition or anything that they might be going through in life and saying, you know what, maybe I should give this thing a try?
Well, I mean, the short answer, and this honestly makes it hard to market this product, is because the short answer is, yeah, it's probably worth trying. And if you think about the boss theory, what we're really doing is reducing the negative impact of stressed mitochondria, which are in every cell in your body. So this has I've got another analogy that may help here, and it's also to see how this analogy kind of applies to Anthony Kunkel, who's really is pushing his mitochondria to the extreme. But I'd like to picture our physiology like a beautiful prairie, right? You got prairie flowers, you got prairie grasses, and let me kind of preface this with stress is actually good. If we got rid of all stress, we just become little puddles of mud and there's no value. And if you have any doubts, think about astronauts going into space. When they come back, their health is a dumpster fire, right? They literally have less bone density and compromised immune systems just from this experience. So stress is actually good. So in this prairie with the prairie flowers and the grasses, I imagine stress being that nice, gentle rain that keeps that prairie kind of at optimal health. But what happens when you have a dark, ominous cloud that's pouring like a faucet into one spot in the middle of the prairie? Well, it actually starts to impinge and create a hole. And we picture this ES60 molecule as like a sponge that you would put between that dark cloud and the prairie to absorb that stream of water. Now, it's important to note, if you don't take care of that dark cloud, eventually the sponge will fill up and start pouring onto the prairie again. But if you take care of that dark cloud, then you can actually squeeze the sponge off over the prairie. And there is no exaggeration to say that we have head-to-toe testimonials. And let me go ahead, I'll throw in a FDA disclaimer. The FDA has not evaluated our product. It is not intended to treat, diagnose, cure, or prevent any disease. When I share anecdotes, I always like to share, hey, this is a cutting-edge new beta product, effectively. Assume this won't happen for you. Dig into the research. We'll probably provide a link for you, specific link for your audience at the end. And if you're interested, you'll be able to get it. So when we think about head-to-toe testimonials, we think about, one, we have testimonials of people sharing, hey, my hair is growing in, it's growing in original color. Again, this is a testimonial. And then for the toe, we actually have, this is interesting, an influencer, a crab bit his big toe when he was 5 years old and split his toenail. Through his career, at one point, he was a Navy SEAL with a split toenail. He gets to age 65 after taking our product and his toe heals at an age when it's not supposed to heal. So there's no kind of exaggeration in head-to-toe testimonials. And we are constantly getting testimonials of things that are pretty serious. And I have to obviously be careful if I'm sharing any disease, if I'm sharing anything even that's pretty serious, but it's amazing. And if I were struggling with some sort of health condition, this would certainly be something that I would be trying. And I would, depending on how serious it is, I'd be trying it at triple or more the servings. But I don't know if that was good. I can give you I've got a couple analogies that I think are well, not analogies, actually kind of interesting testimonials. This one will fit into like, hey, how quickly might I notice something, right? That's often a question. We've got a testimonial video, lady out of the UK. She took the product in the morning and recorded her video that night. And one of her statements that sticks with me is she said she didn't finish her cup of coffee. And if you're a coffee drinker or no coffee drinkers and they noticed they didn't finish their cup of coffee, that's kind of same day notice. Another one is Gwen. So Gwen is actually our largest distributor here in Houston. And she originally ordered the product. She has a Pekingese. And so she originally ordered the product for her Pekingese and with no intent to take it. She noticed such a profound difference in her Pekingese that she was like, okay, now I need to take it. And I like to pause here for a second because as I'm describing these things, and this is part of the problem of marketing this, your radar should be going off. Hey, is this even real? Is this all placebo effect? I mean, yes, placebo effect applies to everything. But one place placebo effect doesn't apply is to pets, right? Ironically, they're not smart enough to know that they got the dropper. And so they're supposed to sleep less and have more energy and all that good stuff. So she noticed such a profound difference in her dog that she starts taking the product. And I recorded a video with her and she said, you know what, Chris, if you had asked me at the 3-month mark if I had noticed anything, my initial response would have been, no, I haven't noticed anything. By the way, I'm going to share arguably the worst testimonial about a supplement you will ever hear. But she then said that she started taking stock of her life. She was working later, getting more work done. She was waking up earlier. She was never a morning person. And then again, the worst testimonial about a supplement ever, she cleaned her garage. Now, we don't use that in any marketing literature, but the reality is that means something, right? The garage is a big mess, often a disaster. Maybe there's some emotional baggage out there. You've got to have the energy to face this. And she did. And so that is kind of how quickly does it act, and then what impact does it have on individuals.
Amazing. Well, we're pretty excited. And, as I say with anyone, certainly feel into your intuition, particularly when trying things out. And as a biohacker myself, I could say that sometimes the randomized, controlled human studies aren't going to come out for a while. But if you're feeling into something and you're feeling the truth of the person sharing it, and there are no side effects, maybe consider it into your routine. So how do people find out more about you, more about the product, and how do they get hold of the product themselves?
So go to MyVitalC, C as in carbon.com/Thrive State. You'll actually find a $15 off coupon code. So that's $15 off your initial order, but you do got to go to that link to get that coupon code. When you land there, so we do have products in olive oil, avocado oil, and MCT oil. And people are like, hey, which one should I take? We always recommend the olive oil for two reasons. The first is we're a science-based organization, and almost all of the research is on the ESS60 molecule in olive oil. The second is because you get a higher concentration of the ESS60 molecule in olive oil. So you get about 0.8 milligrams per milliliter in olive oil, 0.6 in avocado oil, and then 0.3 in MCT oil. The next thing I'll share is there's a right at a 25% discount for going on subscription. Even if you only want to try the product once, go on subscription, take advantage of that discount. You can cancel your subscription at any time. Our customer service team has 1,000 5-star reviews on Google. They are not trained to talk you out of canceling your subscription. They're there to help you, and they do a good job. And I'll share that most people do just stay on subscription. And then I have one piece, a charity piece that I'm extremely proud of. So I do have a book, Live Longer and Better. It gets into more detail of this story, how the molecule was discovered, how it got into the kind of health and wellness space, and then some of my early on longevity journey, like getting into the longevity space. The book is $20 on Amazon, or you can go to the website. Now, it's not on that landing page, but what you should do is go to that landing page, grab that $15 coupon, and then in the menu structure, you'll find the book. It's $20 on our site, but for $10 extra, I'll actually autograph the book for you. And the full $10 goes to Operation Underground Railroad. You may remember the movie The Sound of Freedom, which is a great movie about a horrible topic, which is child sex trafficking, which obviously should be off of our planet yesterday. Operation Underground Railroad is a organization that's tackling that really challenging issue. And so 100% of the signature fee goes to them.
Amazing. Well, thank you for the work that you're doing. Last question for you. And I know you mentioned meditation and certainly your own product as being up there for you, but everything in life you tried, from physical to emotional to the experience that you've had thus far, what has been your best medicine?
I'm going to share that my best medicine has been my friend Patrick Wanis. Now, that may sound really strange or great. Like I think we all know if you have this one friend who can give you great advice, like that could, and they've been with you, for 20 years, that could easily be. He happens to be a human behavior expert and the best therapist I can imagine. And so I can share, my wife and I are together because of him. He doesn't work with us together. He works with us individually. You got to work on your own stuff. Like, you don't work on changing the other person, because that's like, you can't control that. So he works on us individually. I would say the success that I'm seeing in my business is because of him and really what he's helped me clear out. And he has a process called the subconscious rapid transformation technique, where he's accomplishing in about 90 minutes with what you could accomplish in, I don't know, I remember one testimonial, because I used to work on his website a long time ago, which was, I accomplished more in one session with Patrick than in 12 years of therapy, because he just this process hones in on the particular thing that you're willing to address right away, and then releases it. So that would be, I don't know, that's my secret weapon. By the way,
I mean,
happy to share it.
Go ahead. Give us his last name again. This is Patrick.
Yeah, Patrick Wanis, and his website is patrickwanis, WANIS.com. And I'm happy to introduce you, because he's also a fantastic interview. He's Australian, so he's got an Australian accent. Like, he's just got all these things going for him.
Beautiful. Hey, Chris Burres, Thank you for your energy. I particularly really vibe with your approach to life and what you celebrate life. And I'm really rooting for you in this molecule to do a lot of good here in the health space. So thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Dr. V. This was awesome.
I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Thrive State podcast. And if you're finding that this content is really helping you and your family members, please consider supporting our mission and our cause of elevating health, happiness, and human potential for people all over the world. You can do so by making sure that you subscribe to this podcast, sharing it with your friends and family members, and leaving us a 5-star review wherever podcasts are heard. All these things are going to really help elevate the show and to give us the resources to continue to bring more content just like this to yourself as well as the people that you love. If you haven't already, you might want to consider joining our community. We actually have a community where people get to engage with me in group sessions where we do breathwork, meditation, where we do challenges together, really to be able to get us access to health, happiness, human potential, so that we could have longevity and performance in our life as well. You can check out our community at mythrivestate.com. That's mythrivestate.com. And if you haven't already, pick up a copy of my book, Thrive State. It really gives you all the tools, the pillars that you need to create a blueprint to control the energetics of your life. Who are you? How you show up in the world? The choices that you consistently make create an energy in your body, and you can control this. And when you can control that, you also control the messages you give to your DNA that gives you access, again, to optimal health, longevity, and peak performance. And let me also just share a free gift to you. If you haven't already, please pick up my longevity and performance bundle where I share lecture notes, ebooks, breathwork exercises, and longevity and performance resources at thrivestatestarter.com. Thank you so much for being a part of this community. Thank you for helping us grow. Remember always, my friends, that you are your best medicine.